My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and these days, most of my world fits into a 2-bedroom apartment and a 6-year-old boy with the brightest smile you've ever seen. I work part-time as a bookkeeper for a small company downtown, and the rest of my time, well, it belongs to him, to doctor's appointments, to physical therapy sessions, to story hours and Lego towers built with slow, careful hands. Most days, I don't let myself think about what we don't have. It's easier that way. But some moments slip through the cracks, no matter how tightly you hold yourself together. It was a Wednesday morning. I remember because I had just finished paying the electricity bill, counting every dollar twice. When I checked my email, there it was, a short, polished message from my mother. No greeting, no warmth, just a few clipped sentences wrapped in formal politeness. Unfortunately, at this time, we are unable to assist financially. We trust you will find other resources. All the best. That was it. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen, reading it over and over, like maybe it would change if I looked long enough. They had said no. They had said no to $5,000. Money that meant the difference between my son walking without pain or not. 2 days earlier, I had seen the photos. Gold chandeliers strung from the trees, a live band flown in from another state, fireworks that lit up the sky for their silver wedding anniversary, a night of laughter, champagne, and $250,000 spent without hesitation. I had liked the post out of habit, before I even processed what I was seeing, and now, sitting in my kitchen with the hum of the old fridge filling the silence, it landed hard and clear. We were not part of their celebration. We were not part of their world. We never really had been. Looking back, I can't really point to a single moment when the distance between me and my family started. It wasn't sudden. It was built slowly, like a wall laid brick by invisible brick. Polite words here, a quiet dismissal there. I grew up in a house where appearances weren't just important. They were everything. My parents hosted charity galas, attended art auctions, and donated wings to hospitals with plaques that bore their names. From the outside, we looked perfect. The inside was colder. My brother Daniel was the golden child. He fit so easily into their world. Charming, confident, the kind of man who could make a room laugh and believe it was their idea. He married a woman just like him, polished, elegant, effortless in all the ways my mother valued. And me? I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the girl who brought home straight A's but never quite made it onto the stage at family dinners. I was expected to do well, but not to be celebrated for it. Achievements were acknowledged with a nod, a smile that felt distracted, like they were already thinking of something else. There were dinners where I would sit through 2 hours of conversation about Daniel's latest business ventures, his vacation plans, and the new house he was buying. I would smile, sip my water, and wait for someone to ask me about my new job, my new apartment, my life. They rarely did. The difference was subtle, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. But I was. Vacations were planned without me, announced later with casual shrugs. Weddings, galas, anniversaries. Sometimes I received the invitation after the seating chart had been finalized. I learned to stop expecting to be included. I learned how to excuse myself before it hurt too much. When I was 26, I met Ethan. He was nothing like the men my parents had hoped I would marry. He didn't come from a family with old money. He worked with his hands, owned a small construction company, and wore his heart like a badge of honor. No pretense, no performance. We got married in a tiny ceremony at a lakeside park. No live band, no catering service. Just close friends, simple vows, and a sunset that painted the whole sky gold. My parents came, stiff and overdressed, sitting through the ceremony with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. My mother clutched her pearls tighter than usual when Ethan's brother, in worn jeans, gave a toast that made me cry. I could feel their judgment like a second skin. Not loud, not rude, just there, in every glance they exchanged. Afterward, they gave us a check as a wedding gift, enough to cover half the cost of the venue. Tucked inside was a note. "We hope this helps you start building something more substantial." Substantial. As if love and loyalty weren't enough on their own. As if Ethan's value could be measured in square footage and annual income. I tried for years to bridge the gap, inviting them to birthdays, holiday dinners. Even after Ethan and I welcomed our son Noah into the world, I thought maybe, seeing their grandson would soften something inside them. But it didn't. Their affection remained. Curated. When Noah was born, they sent an expensive stroller but didn't visit the hospital. They posed for pictures at his first birthday party but left before the cake was cut. Every interaction came with the unspoken reminder, "You don't quite belong here." Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I had my little family. I had love that was real, messy, and imperfect in all the ways that mattered. When Ethan passed away, a sudden, cruel heart attack one November evening, I stood in our living room and called my parents, my voice shaking. With grief. They sent flowers, not themselves, just flowers. A tall, too-perfect arrangement that arrived the next morning with a card that said, "Thinking of you in this difficult time." I remember placing it in the trash before Noah woke up. I didn't want him to think that's what love looked like. Over the years, I learned to stop asking, stop hoping. Their support, when it came, was always tangled up in expectations. If I smiled for their holiday photos, if I attended their fundraisers, if I played the role they had written for me in their carefully curated life. Love, in my family, wasn't unconditional, it was transactional. When Noah's medical issues first started, when he limped instead of running, when he cried out at night from the pain in his joints, I told myself I could handle it on my own. I had to, but the specialists were clear. He needed surgery sooner rather than later. $5,000, a number that sat like a stone in my chest. $5,000 to give my son a life without pain. $5,000 stood between us and hope. And somewhere deep down, a part of me, foolish and stubborn, believed that this time they would see us. That this time, when it mattered most, love would win over appearances. I was wrong. When Noah's limp first appeared, I told myself it was just growing pains. Kids are resilient, after all. They bounce back. But it didn't go away. It deepened, crept into his sleep, woke him up crying on nights when the house was otherwise silent. The diagnosis came after months of waiting lists and referrals, a specialized condition in his hip joints. Treatable. Not life-threatening if caught early. But the surgery would cost $5,000 up front, and insurance, as always, found a reason not to cover it. I sat in the parking lot outside the hospital with Noah asleep in the back seat, his favorite blanket wrapped around him, and I stared at the steering wheel, trying to think of solutions. I'd already drained the savings account when Ethan died. Every spare penny has gone into rent, utilities, school supplies, and food. I wasn't frivolous. There was simply never enough to save. I didn't want to ask. Every part of me resisted it. The old pride, the old lessons about how their help always came tied up with unspoken debts. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Noah. So I wrote the email carefully. Humble, direct, no emotion in the language. I explained Noah's diagnosis, attached the medical documents, outlined the timeline the doctors had given us. I offered a full repayment schedule, broken down month by month. I even included interest, as if I were applying for a loan from a faceless bank, not reaching out to my own family. I pressed send. For 3 days, There was nothing. Not a call. Not a text. Just silence, like I'd shouted into an empty room. On the fourth day, their reply came, short, polished, and sterile. Sarah, we're sorry to hear about Noah's condition. Unfortunately, at this time, we have other financial commitments that preclude us from offering assistance. We trust you. We'll find alternative resources. All the best. No signature. No warmth. I read it once. Then again, slower, feeling the words land in my chest with a dull finality. Other financial commitments. The phrase stuck in my mind like a thorn. That night, after putting Noah to bed and scrubbing the kitchen counters, in a way that had more to do with frustration than cleanliness, I sat down with my phone, mindlessly scrolling. Anything to keep from thinking too hard. It didn't take long to find it. Photos flooded my feed. Glimmering lights strung across manicured gardens, crystal centerpieces taller than a child, a stage with live performers, imported from out of state, champagne fountains, fireworks that painted the sky gold and silver, my parents' 25th wedding anniversary party, tag after tag after tag, friends, acquaintances, socialites, all praising the spectacle. Some even gushed about the rumored price tag, over $250,000. I sat there, the glow of the screen washing over me in the dark kitchen, feeling something in me crack. $250,000 spent in a single night, and $5,000 was too much to save their grandson from a lifetime of pain. I wasn't naive. I had long known where I stood. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it, feeling the weight of it, the shape of it in your bones, are two very different things. I closed the app, turned off the phone. The kitchen was silent again, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I leaned my forehead against the cool edge of the table, letting the quiet fill me. There were no tears, just a slow, cold settling. They had made their choice. Noah and I were not part of their real lives. Not the lives they celebrated, not the ones they invested in. We were ornaments they displayed when it suited them, forgotten. When it didn't, that realization should have hollowed me out. But strangely, it didn't. Instead, it lit something small and steady inside me. Me, something fiercer than sadness, sturdier than anger. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to dress up my pain and parade it in front of them one more time. They had shown me the terms of their love, and I had finally, completely understood. That night, I stood in Noah's room, watching him breathe, his small chest rising and falling in the dim glow of his nightlight. I placed a hand lightly over his blanket-covered leg, careful not to wake him. "You're not an afterthought," I whispered, so soft I wasn't even sure if I said it aloud. "You never were." And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not to win their approval, not to earn their help, but to carve out a world for Noah and me where we didn't have to ask anymore, where we didn't have to wait for scraps of kindness from people who counted dollars more carefully than hearts. The shift inside me wasn't loud or sudden. It was a quiet thing, a decision folding itself deep into my ribs. I would find another way. I owed my son more than sadness. I owed him a mother who didn't stand at the doors that had been closed against her, knocking and waiting for someone to let her in. I used to think it would get better as I got older, that eventually, if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, I would somehow earn my way into their real affection. But I was wrong, and the proof had been there for years. I was 14 when I needed braces. It wasn't cosmetic. My teeth were so misaligned that it was starting to affect my speech, causing migraines and constant jaw pain. The orthodontist said it wasn't just a matter of aesthetics. If left untreated, it could lead to more serious problems down the line. I remember sitting in the passenger seat of my mother's car after the appointment, clutching the pamphlet the office had given me. I was nervous, but hopeful. I had done Everything right. Good grades, good behavior. Maybe this time, my mother skimmed the paperwork at a red light and sighed. "We'll have to think about it," she said, folding the pamphlet in half without really reading it. "It's a lot of money right now, maybe in a year or two." I didn't argue. I just nodded, staring out the window as the trees blurred by. 2 months. Later, Daniel got a brand new sports car for his 16th birthday, a red convertible, the kind that turned heads and left a trail of envy wherever it went. They threw a huge party for him, too, catered, with a DJ and professional photos and a cake taller than I was. "He deserves it," I overheard my mother saying to one of her friends when she thought I was out of earshot. "He's going places. You have to invest in success." I touched my crooked teeth with my tongue, feeling the ache that had become a familiar throb at the back of my jaw, and said nothing. It wasn't about the car, or the braces. It was about what it all meant. I wasn't an investment. I was an afterthought. That understanding didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, over years of birthdays quietly forgotten, report cards handed over with proud smiles met by distracted nods, milestones passed in the background of Daniel's louder, flashier achievements. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, I gave a speech in front of hundreds of people. My hands shook the whole time, but I made it through. My teachers hugged me afterward. My friends' parents congratulated me like I was one of their own. At the reception, my parents smiled for a few photos, handed me a bouquet they'd picked up from a grocery store, and left early to catch Daniel's dinner party. He had just been promoted to assistant manager at his first job, a family friend's firm. "We're so proud of both of you," my father said, pressing a kiss to my forehead in the parking lot. But tonight's really his night. I stood there on the asphalt, still clutching the flowers, watching their car pull away. It wasn't anger. That settled inside me then. It wasn't even sadness. It was something quieter. A slow unwinding of hope. I didn't cry that night. I didn't rage or beg for attention. I just adjusted. Lowered my expectations the way you lower a blind against a setting sun. Learned to stop asking for a place in a story that had never really been mine to begin with. It was easier that way. Safer, but even lowered expectations can't erase the ache completely. Especially when it comes from the people you once believed were supposed to love you without conditions. The night I read their email about Noah, the cold refusal wrapped in polite words, it wasn't just about the money. It was the old lesson playing out again, louder now, because this time it wasn't just my pain they dismissed. It was his. And somehow, that made it feel sharper than anything I had ever endured before. The braces I never got, the accolades I never celebrated. I had survived all of that. But this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about what kind of mother I was going to be. What kind of life I was going to carve out for my son, away from people who measured worth in ways that had nothing to do with love. The quiet, polite neglect that had followed me through every stage of my life had finally drawn its clearest line. And for the first time, I had no desire to step across it ever again. I didn't make any big announcements. There were no angry posts online, no phone calls demanding apologies, no scenes played out under chandeliers or at heavy dining tables. That wasn't the life I wanted to live. That wasn't the example I wanted to set for Noah. Instead, I started small. Late one night, after Noah had fallen asleep with his book open on his chest, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened a blank page. I wasn't sure at first what I was going to say. The words came slowly, halting at times, raw at others. I told the truth, about my son, about his smile that never faded, even when he limped, about the surgery he needed, and how time wasn't on our side. about the cost that stood between him and a future without pain. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I simply asked for help, not from my family, but from the world beyond them. When I finished writing, I hesitated only a moment before clicking publish. The fundraiser went live at midnight. By morning, there were already a handful of small donations, $5 here, $10 there, mostly from friends and neighbors, people who knew Noah's giggle, who had seen him trying to run and falling with a confused, pained look on his face. I went to work, that day with a knot in my stomach, unsure whether I had done the right thing. Pride is a strange thing. It can keep you warm when you have nothing else, and it can strangle you when you finally reach for help. But when I came home that evening, Noah's babysitter, Mrs. Avery, met me at the door with tears shining in her eyes. "You should check your page," she said, squeezing my hand. I sat on the couch with Noah leaning against my side and opened the fundraiser. The number had tripled since morning. Local businesses had started sharing it. Teachers from Noah's school had chipped in. People I hadn't spoken to in years left small notes of encouragement with their donations. For Noah, "You've got this, little man." And, from one single mom to another, "You're doing amazing." By the end of the week, we had enough for the surgery. And then some. I used every extra dollar to plan for his recovery. Better shoes, therapy sessions, a ramp for the stairs at our apartment. Somewhere along the way, the story caught the attention of a local news outlet. They reached out gently, offering to write a piece about community support and resilience. I hesitated, then agreed, but only if they focused on the kindness, not the need. The article went live on a Sunday morning. Noah and I were featured with a photo taken in our tiny garden, both of us smiling shyly at the camera. The headline read, "A town rallies for a boy's second chance." It wasn't until Tuesday that I received the email. It was from my father. "Short, urgent. We'd like to contribute to the fundraiser. Please let us know where to send a private check to cover expenses." No apology, no acknowledgement of the earlier refusal, just a sudden, desperate desire to erase their absence once it had become visible to others. I sat with the email for a long time. Once, I would have seen it as an olive branch, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they cared after all. But now, I saw it for what it was. Not an act of love, an act of damage control. I drafted my reply carefully, measured, unemotional. "Thank you for your offer," I wrote, "but Noah's needs are fully met. We have been deeply blessed by the kindness of those who choose to show up for us without obligation or expectation. I respectfully decline any further financial assistance. I wish you both well." I hit send, then, without drama or ceremony, I blocked their numbers, unfriended them quietly, deleted their contacts from my phone, not in anger, not in punishment, in peace. A few weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that whispers had started circling among their social set, questions about why they hadn't been at the fundraiser events, why the local paper's story hadn't mentioned them, why people who prided themselves on philanthropy had somehow missed the chance to support their own grandson. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I barely thought about it at all. Their embarrassment was theirs to carry. It no longer had anything to do with me. For the first time, I understood that walking away isn't a dramatic exit. It's the simple act of choosing your own peace over someone else's chaos. We didn't need their money. We didn't need their approval. We needed each other. And we had that, in abundance. After the surgery, when Noah took his first pain-free steps across our living room floor, his arms thrown wide and laughter bubbling up from his chest, I realized something else too. They hadn't just missed a fundraiser. They had missed this, the real celebration, the real miracle, and no amount of money could buy their way back into a moment they had chosen not to value when it mattered most. It's strange how life can feel both heavier and lighter. After a storm has passed, the surgery was a success. Noah's recovery wasn't easy. There were tough nights, tears we both tried to hide from each other. But slowly, steadily, he began to heal. The first time he ran across the living room without wincing, without hesitation, I didn't cheer or clap or cry. I just stood there, my hands pressed lightly against my mouth, memorizing the moment so deeply I knew I would carry it with me forever. After everything, after the fundraiser, after cutting ties with my parents so cleanly it almost felt surgical, something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't want to stay in the apartment any longer, not because it was small or worn around the edges, but because it was a place built from survival. And now, I wanted something built from hope. Thanks to the leftover donations and a few small grants, I found us a little house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms. A tiny backyard that needed a lot of love. Paint peeling from the porch. Wildflowers pushing up stubbornly through the cracked walkway. Perfect. On our first night there, Noah and I sat on the floor of the living room eating takeout pizza straight from the box. No curtains yet, no furniture, just us, the sound of crickets. Outside, and the sweet, dizzying feeling of starting fresh. We made a promise to each other that night. This house would be filled with laughter, even on hard days. It would be a place where messes were allowed, where trying mattered more than perfection, where love wasn't earned by performance, it just was. In the months that followed, we started building new traditions, brick by small, messy brick. For Thanksgiving, instead of fancy centerpieces or catered meals, we made paper turkeys and burnt half the rolls. For Christmas, Noah and I strung popcorn on thread until our fingers cramped, laughing at the lopsided tree we decorated with handmade ornaments. We didn't have matching dishware or expensive gifts stacked under the tree. We had each other. And somehow, it felt like more wealth than I had ever known growing up. I started journaling again, late at night when the house was quiet and the only sound was the soft turning of pages. But I didn't write about anger. I didn't write about revenge. I wrote about resilience, about the quiet kind of strength that doesn't come from standing in spotlights, but from standing your ground when no one is looking. About the kind of love that doesn't announce itself, with grand gestures, but hums in the background of every small act of care. About the freedom that comes not from winning battles, but from choosing not to fight for a seat at tables where you were never truly welcome. Sometimes old habits try to creep back in, the urge to wonder if my parents have changed, if they think about Noah, if they regret the choices they made. But then I watch my son race across the backyard, a homemade banner flying above him that reads, "Best day ever." And I remember, we are already living the life they could never have given us. Not because of the size of our home, not because of the money in our bank account, but because here, love isn't a currency. It's the air we breathe. I don't know what stories my parents tell themselves now. I don't need to know. Their world, the world of appearances, obligations, and transactions, feels like a country I once visited but never really belonged to. I left without packing a suitcase. I left without slamming the door. I just walked away. And every day, in every small, ordinary, miraculous moment with my son, I keep choosing not to go back. It turns out, the best celebrations aren't the ones with fireworks and fountains and 5-figure budgets. They're the ones with bare feet on cool grass, homemade lemonade that's too sweet, laughter that starts deep in your belly and leaves your cheeks aching. The ones where you look around and realize you're already home.